Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Berkowitz and Hanna Love of the Law podcast. Today, I'm pleased to have as my guest Doug Brown, a nationally known law firm leadership coach. Doug is a college graduate of Syracuse University and went to law school at American University Washington College of Law, where he obtained his JD. Following his graduation from law school, Doug's professional journey began in the early 1990s, where he worked at a prestigious law firm as an associate, handling commercial transactions and commercial litigation matters. From there, Doug went in-house as a corporate counsel for USCO Logistics, where he handled all aspects of USCO's corporate legal matters. From there, Doug's professional journey continued as an executive at several major corporations and startups. In 2011, Doug had a career change where he chose to become an executive coach and consultant to law firms, and subsequently expanded his coaching and consulting to assist business professionals. Doug is currently Chief Learning Officer at Summit Success, a global personal and professional development firm serving entrepreneurs, C-level execs, business professionals, lawyers, coaches, and consultants. So without further ado, I welcome Doug to the show.
Hi, Russ. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Now, Doug, the audience just heard about your very professional resume, and feel free to fill in the gaps if I missed something. But the first thing I think that we're all interested in is, how did your professional journey, first as an attorney, then as a corporate executive, lead you to becoming an executive coach? And maybe you can tell the audience exactly what does an executive coach do as it relates to attorneys?
Yeah, there's a lot there I'm happy to share. I guess I started off in, like you said, the early 90s in a small office of a firm in Connecticut. And, I loved the firm. It was a great place to work, but I always felt like there was a little something missing. And then back in the, early mid 90s, I went to work with a career coach trying to figure out, what do I really want to do? Because, we don't know much in our 20s. And I remember at that point, he said, you got the great profile to be a coach. And I said, that's not even a job. I mean, in the mid 90s, it wasn't a thing. So I kind of put that on the shelf. And one thing led to another. I got an opportunity to go in-house at a corporation and got a chance to move on to the business side, learned a bunch of different things. I've always been a business guy and a deal maker. And I realized that through my career over the years, that my leadership style was very much about coaching and developing people and helping them for themselves, grow their skills. Teacher, mentor, coach was always kind of how I operated. And then when I left the corporation in around 2008, I got an opportunity to teach leadership, entrepreneurship, and innovation at the Baldrige School of Business, and realized that my business experience plus my JD allowed me to be a program chair in a master's and MBA program. And that's when I realized that, this whole teaching and quote coaching thing was really for me the highest and best way to use my skills, because along the way, I've always had somebody in my corner like that, and, on and off, and then consistently as kind of my coach. So I thought of this as an opportunity because I've always gotten a lot of value out of it myself. And I saw the power of it. And I thought, that really could be powerful. And then, as I moved into different things, I realized that after trying consulting, which is, for your audience, consulting is when somebody does it for you. And coaching is when somebody does it with you and teaches you how to do it so that you can reach your own conclusions. I realized that having a coach in your corner helped you be more efficient, productive, and lead a better life. And I wanted to be that for lawyers because God knows we need it.
Now, I can certainly attest to Doug's coaching skills, since he has been instrumental in assisting me as a sounding board, as a managing partner of a boutique law firm regarding our firm, our mission, and for me personally. Maybe you can explain to the audience, or just rather than generically that you're a coach, what exactly, as it relates to lawyers, what are you doing as a coach, depending on both the lawyer or the law firm that you're hired by?
Well, maybe I'll kind of break it down into a couple of different steps, because, one of the misconceptions that our profession has is that you have to be broken or doing something wrong to go out and get help. And most of the lawyers I work with are people like you. They're already smart, successful, accomplished, and then they're at a point where they know something needs to change. They may not be sure exactly what it is or where to start, but they know that there's this next step they have to take. So when I break down what I do, it's helping those people see things differently and having a different perspective, maybe breaking things down, cutting through the noise and simplifying because we have so much going on. Sometimes it's making space to think more clearly or giving a framework, or maybe it's just identifying a blind spot. And what I have observed over the years I've been doing this is providing an opportunity for my clients to just have an absolutely confidential, non-judgmental space where they can think and share and collaborate with somebody who's only interested in them and their success without any other agenda is enormously powerful for the lawyer because it helps them see things more clearly. And so then we use that to break things down, provide structure, and move things ahead in next steps. So that's really it's being that facilitator, and not just for me asking questions, but bringing my life experience across all the different corporate disciplines, and especially things they didn't teach in law school about how to run a business so that it serves your life rather than just having your life serve your business.
I have been a leader of my law firm for probably 25, almost 30 years. And obviously, as a managing partner, you grow over time, but you never really know if you're growing in the right way. And you never really know if you're leading in the right way because you don't have anybody above you that can actually be your mentor, so to speak. So I found it enlightening when I met you, although I used to see when you were the president of the Bar Association or the executive director of the Connecticut Bar Association, I saw your face on the internet every month because you had a letter you sent out to all the members once a month. But I didn't know you personally. But once I finally retained you, I was at a point in my career where I felt that the firm needed to, if we were going to grow in a better way, I needed some help in having someone, as you say, non-judgmentally help me make my own decisions. And I felt that, at least as it related to me, your coaching was about helping a leader who doesn't have anybody above him, helping him lead, where you had the experience as an attorney and as an executive coach and a corporate guy, and you've experienced all different kinds of lawyers where we all think we're unique, but I would think that the business model is somewhat similar depending on the size of the operation. But I think that was what was most helpful for me because most managing partners don't have someone above them to walk them through things. So you have to be the visionary, and you want to make sure as the visionary that you're not driving anybody off a cliff. Was that one of your roles, to make sure that the leader continues to drive straight down the road and not make a wrong turn?
Yeah, and thank you for saying that. That's why I focus on the leadership aspects of things, because it's not necessarily not making a wrong turn, but making sure the turns that you make are intentional. So if there's a good reason to pivot and go do something different, I'm going to help you think it through. So it's not just a neat idea or a seizure. It's in the interest of your ultimate goals of where you really want to go. And it is a challenge, as you've seen, when you have been smart and successful. And, I think of myself not necessarily above, but I'm right there as the right-hand person, the thinking partner. And whether it's with you or with I had another client who had purchased a business, and he would come in and we'd talk a lot about people and process. He was spinning it off from a bigger company. One of his stories was, every time I came in and wanted to do something, because he was a doer, and you'd tell me to slow down and think it through, I'd get really irritated. But then, because I followed your advice, we made better decisions, and I was able to grow the business 30% in the first year. So it wasn't about telling him no. It was, are you really sure? Like, how else could you do that? And I think that's especially important when people are trying to figure out what's next for themselves in their career. They've reached a certain level of success, and, they don't want to talk to their spouse about this, and they certainly can't talk to their partners or their associates or their colleagues. So they wonder, who the heck am I going to talk to that's not going to just nod their head and say you're doing a great job? And that's what's fun for me, because I know from experience that successful lawyers have most of what they need inside of them, and they can make, like you said, make your own good decision. They just need somebody to help them see things in a different way, fill in some blanks, and then so they can have confidence they made the right call.
So just specifically, what are some of the services that you provide to, whether it be managing partners or other lawyers within a firm when you are retained?
Yeah, well, what's different about the way I do it is it's very customized for each person. So most of the lawyers don't walk in asking for a labeled, I need coaching or I need consulting. They just know they need to do something like you had presented. So I kind of work with them like a personal trainer. I help them identify where are we trying to go and how are we going to get there so I can figure out what quote services or offerings would make the most sense. And then I configure each one, for that person. And sometimes it's a strategic project, like working on succession planning. Like, how do I delegate more effectively? What can my partners take over? What if I want to step back? How do the wheels not come off? Or I'm working with one lawyer on, I want to take my little firm and merge it into a larger one so I can scale back. Another category is like operational and people challenges. We're trained as lawyers to really be logical, but so much of managing people is about managing emotions, and we're not really trained to deal with that. So that turns into how to deal with difficult, sometimes partners, staff, how to delegate more effectively, how to make sure that you as a leader are showing up in a way and using good leadership skills, not just what you learned from those who came before you, so that you can manage across the different generations in your firm, because the skills that got those of us in our 50s and older here are not the skills that are going to work on this younger generation. So, and the way I do that is one-on-one with people, meeting them where they are and giving them what they need as they need it. So it's not overwhelming. So I don't prescribe I have a system and everybody should use my system. Each of my clients is different. I mean, they all have things in common, but they like that. These are the same kind of people like you who says, I don't want to be in a group program. I want somebody who's going to give me what I need and recognize where my strengths are.
Obviously I have a very age group here at my firm, and I'm sure that's prevalent throughout the legal field. What are some of the issues that you have seen pop up, let's say, over the last 10 years as you've dealt with leadership who may be boomers, maybe Gen X's, and then you have your millennials and you have your Gen Z's as younger staff? Have you noticed that there is a sort of like common theme that arises among management if they're more of the Gen X boomer population, and some of the pros and cons that have come up? And how do you deal with that when one of the reasons why that you're being retained is to deal with this generation gap, so to speak, between boomers and Gen Zs?
That's a great question. And it comes up, all the time. I actually got a chance to speak about this, and I wrote about this in an article for Law Practice Today for the American Bar Association. And the key premise was rethinking how we're interacting across generations. Because I was talking with one of my clients and lamenting the, millennial snowflake situation that he was dealing with. So we talked for a fair amount on, well, it wasn't like this for us in the day, and why can't the younger people just be more like us? And I thought that, and I said, how did that work out for us? I mean, our profession has some of the highest rates of depression, divorce, substance abuse, suicide, and unhappiness of any profession. So is it possible that the model that we use to get here, is that the model we want to give to our kids? So shifting our mindset a little bit about, okay, I don't want you to lower your standards, but I want us to be open and curious about how can we bridge this gap with the Gen Zs and millennials who really do think differently than us. And then at the same time, understanding what motivates them so we can try to find some common ground.
How do they think differently than, for instance, someone that's in their 50s and 60s?
It's really interesting. Well, it's a little bit, remember that old book, The Mars-Venus Problem? The men are from Mars and women are from Venus. It's that level of disconnect between the younger generations and the boomers and Gen Xers. Some of the differences are the younger generation wants to figure out things on their own. They want to understand, they want to own things. It's really important to them of how we're keeping score so they can know when they've succeeded. They want to be recognized for their contributions. This notion of just do what I say and everything, just trust me. The hierarchy, they really don't believe in that. But the paradox is also, while they want and need independence of how to do things, they also crave structure. So it's how do you find the right level of structure so that within that structure, they can have some autonomy. And you can definitely do that. For example, most of us haven't been trained how to delegate effectively. There's actually a recipe or a formula I teach about it, how to do delegation effectively that works across generations. And if both sides are working out of the same playbook, well, now you've got a common language. And part of that delegation is also how to deliver feedback. And, some of the feedback I got back in the day was if you made a mistake, it came back with a lot of red ink on the page. It was actually on paper. And sometimes it was thrown at you. Not necessarily the most effective way to give feedback, but there's a way to do it that builds that younger person's confidence. And it's also about helping that younger generation understand that and break down that barrier of not appreciating the wisdom of the older generation. So we need to meet in the middle. And there's some part of the article I wrote was about some language you can use to try to open those conversations. A lot of this work that I do comes down to understanding the issue and how to communicate effectively about it.
And I would think from the leader's perspective, they have to learn how to become flexible because, as you said, it is a different generation. Culturally, younger people think differently than people from an earlier generation. They have different life experiences. They watch their parents come home from work saying, "Oh, I hate my job." And if you hear that long enough over 14, 15 years, why are you going to want to have the same sort of work style as how your parents did, who seemed to be miserable, even though in retrospect, they really weren't miserable. That's just what they were used to. And that was just their way of complaining about that they were okay with it. And the work style was different and how they work is different. And I would think that one of the things that you probably had to grapple with as a coach is this whole issue about in-person versus remote work, which developed during COVID, and how the older generation want to pull everybody back into the office and the younger generation want to work remotely. And obviously, over time, I think it's changed to a fair extent, at least in our profession, that each firm probably has developed their own way of dealing with it, depending on the pulse of the firm. But like at our firm, everybody came back to work within, I would say, the first 6 months, because we're a litigation firm, there's a collaboration element involved, and it's not a corporate firm where we're doing contracts independently. And how are you advising firms during this post-COVID period where leaders would say to you, "Doug, I can't get these people to come back to work. We've got like a 10-year lease here. The office is empty and they all want to work remotely and they work at like 10 o'clock at night and they don't work regular work hours." And how did you go about leading them down the road in that respect?
Yeah, great question. So much of it comes down to what are the particulars of the firm. Sometimes there's just really good operational reasons you need to be together. And sometimes there are reasons of, I just don't want to bother managing people remotely. I believe if they're in the office, they must be more productive and I can watch what they're doing. And, to the younger generations, like, it's not really a good answer, because if I'm sitting in the office, you still don't know what I'm doing. So if we focus on what kind of culture you're trying to build, be intentional about the culture you're creating, because you're creating a culture, good or bad, no matter what you do. So let's make it intentional. If you believe that having people in the office, both culturally and operationally, makes the most sense, then let's break that down so we can help everybody understand why it makes the most sense, as opposed to just giving an edict. And how do you meet that and provide the kind of flexibility so that you accomplish your goals, you build your culture, and also can attract and retain the best people? There's no one size fits all where you must be in the office or it's okay to be remote. It really depends on the firm. As you said, for your firm, you're moving so fast and there's so much collaboration that happens because that's how the business works, that somebody being remote regularly would be hard to fit into your culture, where there are other firms where they work very effectively remote. You mentioned a minute ago about leadership style. Most of us have we all have a default leadership style. often it's not intentional. And what I learned through teaching and experience is we can learn the different management styles and apply them to the right situation, situational leadership. So that way you're matching your style to the situation, just like you'd match your trial technique to the particular case or jury profile. But you have to know about the styles and you need to learn how to use them. And it's the same thing when you look at return to office. I think where firms are most struggling is where they haven't been clear about why, and they also have defaulted to the old mythical metrics of if you're present, you're productive, because that has nothing to do with productivity. I'd much rather help us set what are the observable things that need to be delivered that measure success in your job, like businesses do, beyond just billable hours, especially in your firms where it's all contingent. So what are the metrics? What does success look like? And as long as you can deliver those metrics and fit into the culture, shouldn't that be the primary thing? And sometimes the answer is no, we got to do it another way. But that's my approach to it.
Yeah, no, it's a good approach. I mean, it's funny because my daughter recently took a new position. She's a consultant and she works remotely, 3 days a week remotely, 2 days a week in the office. And I said to her, how does one ever grow with a company, and how do they ever put their name, how do they put themselves out there where you can get a promotion if you're always working remotely? I'm not saying her, I'm saying in general. And she's like, it doesn't work how you think it works anymore. I mean, you don't have to physically be in the office for you to be recognized. You're on Zoom all the time. They recognize you based on your performance, either in the work you do, in the way you speak. And we do have meetings periodically in person, so they get to know you a little bit, because, the older generation is, it's important to come in every day, talk about, hey, did you see the game last night, or what'd you do last night? And you don't have that necessarily when you're dealing with a remote crowd, because you're getting out of meeting. There's very little chatter on a personal level. You just dive into the meeting. It's a different way, where if you've been doing something the same way for like 25, 30 years, and all of a sudden it's changed to sort of, I like to use the word in more of an impersonal sort of way of practicing, or, your job. It's a little tricky, at least in our field, to be one where you can actually see and understand that they're actually accomplishing things.
Just want to jump in because you're absolutely right. And it's a key part. Our success with our clients and in our firm depends almost entirely upon emotion and relationships. And different generations form relationships differently. But it's the thing that so many of us miss with clients and with promotions is you need to have informal ways of communicating and connecting to establish those relationships, because that emotional intelligence is what drives your success. And they don't teach that in law school.
Just so the audience understands, in case we have some managing partners or leaders of firms out there, can you just, I know you said that not one size fits all, but can you walk us through what your methodology is when a managing partner at a law firm reaches out to you and says, hey, Doug, I need your help with our firm, or the managing partner says, or with himself or herself?
Yeah, absolutely. And I got to be honest, it's most often I need help with someone else, when the truth is that it's probably both. But my first job isn't to jump in with solutions. I actually use what I learned as a lawyer, which is to really try to understand what's really going on, what's driving the behavior, what is the thing that they expect to have happen, and what's actually happening. So if we can really clarify what they want, what's getting in the way, and what success looks like, then we can break it down into manageable pieces, identify what's working and what's not, and what are some things that we can change that would have high impact. Because sometimes you can change one or two things and it can affect a whole bunch of things. So sometimes I'm dealing very one-on-one, primarily the leader and the managing partner, of identifying vision, future strategy, and how to learn how to let go and delegate some things and still have standards met. And other times I'm spending all my time responding to emails and dealing with crises, and I need to find a way to have my firm manage itself more effectively. I'm like, okay, well, if that's the problem, then we go and work into how to do that. So it's really a structured process, although the subject is different for each firm. So we're going to diagnose what's going on. And then we're going to look at what success looks like, break down what are the steps we need to have happen. And then we're going to go make it happen, which includes talking through things. I provide, resources like you did back and forth. I'll do some analysis. I'll ask you to do some things so we can kind of organically get to the place of, all right, this is where we want to go. We now know we're fixing the root of the issue, not a symptom. And now let's work on that.
I'm sure that there's been a percentage of your clients that have approached you and said, Doug, I'm burnt out. I've been doing this a long time. I don't necessarily know how to leave the practice, leave the firm. I need your help in that respect. And how do I change how I practice? I'm going to continue. And how do I extricate myself from the practice altogether if that's what I want?
First, we acknowledge that just reaching out is a huge step. I mean, Russ, I've had over my career my own recurring challenges with burnout and other things. And I've been there. I've figured out how to deal with that. I've figured out it was only late in life that I discovered that a lot of my source of my power, as well as the thing that was kicking my butt, was, undiagnosed ADHD and other things like that. So I get the burnout piece that's going on. And so part of the first thing is trying to get some immediate relief, breaking that cycle of burnout so that we can create some space to think more freely about the future. And so that's some immediate kind of short-term things. I'm not a therapist. I've just lived this stuff. And sometimes just having somebody to talk to who's lived it, who's not going to judge you and can offer strategies to kind of turn the volume down on the burnout a little bit, that creates the space. And then we can think and say, well, what is it about your practice right now that you love and you would like to keep doing? What is it that you don't ever want to have to do again? And then what do you want your future to look like? So once we kind of turn down the static, we try to figure out what is that future goal? What is the thing you really want? Like conversations of, I need something to do. I can't just go off and play golf 5 days a week. And I have the money to retire, but I don't even know what that looks like. I'd probably my wife would divorce me or something. Like, okay, well, let's figure out retirement doesn't have to be an A-B switch, either on or off. What is it you want? Where do you get your juice? Where do you want your future to look like? How could you apply your skills? And we create that vision that, hey, I can have a life that gives me the freedom I want, is intellectually stimulating, handles myself emotionally, physically, and so forth. Now we've got a vision of what we want to have happen, just like you would in a business strategy. Like, this is my vision for the business. And then we try to figure out in incremental steps, how do we start moving in that direction? And a lot of the thing with burnout is it's not your fault you're burnt out. I mean, that's an occupational hazard. It is a physical and biological condition that comes as a result of not having strategies to deal with consistent and persistent stress over time. So once we teach the strategies and you get support on that, then you get some clarity to think about how do you configure your practice so it can support you.
Are the problems that you hear different depending on whether someone is a solo practitioner or runs a boutique law firm or a big law firm, or are they all the same, just as they say, bigger firms, bigger problems, little firms, little problems, or is it somewhere in the middle?
There are definitely differences in how firms operate, from great big firms to solo practitioners to firms with a management group of lawyers to a firm led by a lawyer and then a group of partners and so forth, and by type of practice. But the real issues when we dig down to the heart of it are usually about people, priorities, and pressure, because we weren't taught how to lead. So if we can come in and see for that lawyer what's going on for them. For instance, in the solo practitioner, everything really is revolving around them. So we have to figure out how can they both financially and operationally get the kind of support they need. In a mid-sized firm, you might have one partner who really thinks that they're the heir apparent, but they have no leadership skills. And you've got somebody else who is more low-key, but there would be a great heir apparent. All right, well, how do we navigate that so that we can take some pressure off of the owner? And in bigger firms where it's managed by committee, there is more politics involved and more understanding. That's where my big corporate experience helps. More understanding, how is it that you can navigate this situation? What's really going on at the top of the house? I have a client now who's an associate in a larger firm that's run from another state, and there's a lot of chaos at the top of the house trying to figure out things are changing. And when she came to me, she was all spun up about all these things she can't control. So we diagnosed the situation and got her to a point, we're working on a path where she can be in control of what she can control and then have her element of the practice configured so it works for her now. And then if something happens with the firm, she'll have a plan B in place. The tasks are very similar. It's the context that's different.
You're also sought out as a public speaker. You have your own podcast. You write blogs. Can you share some information for the audience? Where would they find you if they wanted to, for instance, see or hear a video, audio presentation, or your podcast, or follow one of your blogs? There was one recently that you sent out, and it said, athletes have a coach, and why should lawyers have a coach? And I really hit home that everybody needs a coach. Everyone needs somebody that they can, look to say, things aren't going so great. Can you help me change how things are going? And, sports could be you're changing someone's tennis stroke. The lawyer could just be changing their lifestyle or their work style, whatever it may be. So, but if someone needs to find you, how do they find you? And tell us a little bit more about your podcast and some of your speaking events.
Oh, so appreciate that. Well, the simplest way to get access to everything is through my website. It's DougBrownJD.com. That's a gateway to everything that I do. And my podcast is Law Firm Success Strategies. And there's a link on my site to that page. And in that Law Firm Success Strategies, I spend time sharing my information and talking with lawyers on the things that I think they really want to know about that they didn't learn in law school. So I've got conversations with marketing people, with a recruiter, just about emotional intelligence, just things that I think are useful. And I've also got a LinkedIn newsletter. The things that I talk about and the email that you mentioned, I was inspired by the Masters golf tournament, which was just a week or so ago on the date of this recording. I watch golf differently. I watch the golfers, but I also pay a lot of attention to the caddies, especially when I go to a golf tournament. And if you can see that, you'll see that they're always talking to their caddy. They're planning their shot. And the caddy has one or two things that they know the golfer needs to think about right before they step up to the shot. And it's not the golfer doesn't know, but that caddy is like that thinking partner for them. And it helps them win. In this particular year's Masters, Rory had that disastrous shot on the 13th hole and came back. And that wasn't just his own skill. It was that caddy who was helping him stay in the zone, putting that behind him and just focusing on the next shot. That's very similar to the work that I do with folks. And my speaking, I love my speaking. I think I told you in the pre-show, if I have a microphone, I'm a happy guy. I'll do plenty of CLEs and live programs and trainings on everything from how to delegate without micromanaging, how to optimize your legal team, strategic growth and succession, public speaking. And a big one right now is mindfulness. And it's how to boost productivity, well-being, and mental health. So make money and live a better life. So those are all things that I have links to on my site. I do that remotely and in live programs. I am really heartened. It's nice to see that on programs that wouldn't even have been a thing, the mindfulness for lawyers, getting comments like it was the best CLE I've been in a long time. And that's mindfulness. It's not a technical thing. So there's really a lot of need for this out there. The statistics are very clear in the business world that executives who invest in the right coach for them have an ROI of 5 to 7 times whatever their investment is because they've got that caddy by their side. And the thing that I'll get off my soapbox on this is Rory won the Masters. He didn't decide, great, I don't need my caddy anymore. He knows that person was essential to his success. And every entrepreneur needs not just the caddy, but there's a nutritionist, there's a short game coach, there's a psychologist. They have a team of people around them. And we as lawyers have to embrace this idea that to be at really peak performance, we need the right team around us so that we can focus at what we're best in the world at, which is whatever your unique value is as a lawyer. And yours is in, the work that you do leading your firm and getting great verdicts for your clients.
I just want to thank you for everything that you've done for our firm and me personally. Unfortunately, like anything else in life, our time here has come to an end, and I appreciate you taking the time. I know you're a busy guy, and thanks for appearing today.
Thanks so much for having me.